Breaking news. A shocking revelation has shattered the carefully crafted image of the first family. Multiple sources close to the White House claim that Barron Trump, the 19-year-old son of President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania, has endured years of psychological and emotional abuse behind closed doors. Far from the golden boy of privilege portrayed in glossy photos, Barron is described as a young man forced to live under a regime of fear, pressure, and control imposed by his own father. Former staffers paint a grim picture: late-night shouting matches, cruel remarks about Barron's weakness, and a household where approval was measured not in love, but in loyalty to Donald Trump's political brand. One insider recalls hearing the president sneer, "You'll never be strong enough to carry my name." Another describes moments when Barron withdrew into silence, retreating from family dinners to avoid humiliation. For Americans, the allegations cut deeper than any policy scandal. If even the president's own son was not spared from intimidation and belittlement, what does that say about the man who holds the highest office in the land? Images of Barron's quiet demeanor at public events, his downcast eyes, his rare smiles, suddenly take on a darker meaning. What the public once dismissed as shyness may have been the mask of survival. The revelations lit up social media. Hashtags like "Thou Barron Speaks" and "End the Silence" surged, with young people identifying with his struggle. "I know that look," one commenter wrote. "That's the look of someone who's learned to stay quiet to avoid pain." And into this storm stepped Jasmine Crockett. Her words were not mocking, but compassionate. "This is not about politics. This is about a young man who has grown up in the shadow of power, stripped of the simple dignity every child deserves: love, safety, and respect." If Barron Trump was silenced in the most powerful home in the world, then how many other young Americans are suffering in silence tonight? The press room fell silent at her statement. For the first time, someone dared to speak, not against Barron, but for him. The gloves were off, but this time the fight wasn't about tearing down a rival. It was about defending a son caught in the crossfire of power and cruelty. The details that began to emerge were chilling. Former White House staffers and even members of the security detail, speaking anonymously, described a household where Barron Trump's life was shaped by constant criticism and control. One aide recalled hearing the president belittle his son during a private dinner, mocking his voice as too soft and telling him, "You'll never be a leader if you can't even look me in the eye." Another staff member said Barron often sat silently, eyes fixed on his plate, as the atmosphere thickened with tension. A member of the Secret Service, bound by confidentiality but compelled by conscience, shared that he often witnessed the aftermath of explosive arguments. Barron would retreat to his room, headphones on, shutting out the world, but you could still see it in his face, the weight of something no teenager should carry. The young man's limited public appearances began to take on new significance. Analysts replayed clips of Barron standing beside his father at rallies, his expression blank, shoulders slumped. What many had once dismissed as shyness now looked like the survival posture of someone who had learned not to draw attention. Former classmates added their voices. One said Barron confided that his father's expectations were impossible, that every mistake was treated like betrayal. "He didn't talk much," the classmate admitted, "but when he did, you could tell he felt trapped, like he had to live up to a role he didn't choose." Social media lit up with sympathy. Young Americans flooded TikTok and X with posts declaring solidarity. Barron's story is our story. Pressure, silence, and fear, it's too familiar. Hashtags Number Barron speaks and number no child. A fear surged into the millions. Survivors of strict and abusive households shared their own memories, seeing themselves in his quiet demeanor. Jasmine Crockett amplified their voices. Standing before cameras, she delivered a statement that resonated across generations. Barron Trump didn't ask to be born into power. He didn't ask for cameras or politics, yet he carries scars that millions of young people recognize, scars of silence, of fear, of being told you are never enough. We must stop pretending this is normal. Abuse is abuse, no matter the family name. Her words hit like thunder. For the first time, America wasn't mocking the youngest Trump. It was sympathizing with him. And in doing so, Jasmine had reframed the story. Barron wasn't a punchline, but a symbol of the cost of silence inside even the most powerful home in the world. The revelations about Barron Trump's suffering sparked an outpouring of compassion across America. For years, the public had seen him as a distant, almost mysterious figure, rarely speaking, often appearing withdrawn beside his towering father. But now, with insiders exposing the reality of life inside the White House, Americans began to view him not as a privileged heir, but as a young man trapped in a prison of expectation and fear. Crowds gathered outside the White House gates, holding signs that read, "We stand with Barron," and "No child should live in fear." Domestic violence awareness groups joined forces with student organizations, staging vigils with candles and purple ribbons, the symbol of solidarity with survivors. One sign, carried by a veteran, read, "If the president's son isn't safe, how can my daughter be?" News outlets aired endless loops of Barron's past public appearances, analyzing every blank expression, every downcast gaze. The narrative shifted. What once seemed like aloofness was now understood as the survival mask of a young man enduring humiliation behind closed doors. Social media exploded. Millions shared their own stories under the hashtag #StandWithBarron, transforming his silence into a national conversation about youth, power, and abuse. For seniors and parents across the nation, the story was heartbreaking. That boy never asked for politics. He deserved love, not fear. But the president himself reacted with fury. At a rally in Ohio, Donald Trump roared into the microphone, his face flushed with anger. "Lies, total lies. My son is strong, my son is perfect, and these fake stories are nothing but attacks on me. Jasmine Crockett is a clown, a disgrace who will say anything to get attention." He pounded the podium, waving his arms, dismissing every allegation as part of a sick plot. The performance backfired. The louder he screamed, the more Americans remembered the quiet image of Barron standing silently by his side. Side-by-side broadcasts played Trump's angry tirade against Jasmine Crockett's calm statements. One anchor summed it up. "The contrast is striking. A father shouting denials, and a young man's silence that says more than words ever could." Jasmine Crockett, undeterred, fired back with precision. "The president can yell all he wants. He can call me names. He can call these stories lies. But what he cannot do is erase the truth written on his own son's face. That is not strength. That is suffering. And America sees it now." The crowd erupted in applause as her words circulated online, trending under number "Truth in Silence." For millions, Barron had become a symbol, not of wealth or privilege, but of the hidden pain endured by countless young people who feel voiceless in their own homes. As the controversy deepened, more voices came forward, painting an even darker picture of Barron Trump's life behind the gleaming facade of the White House. Former tutors, aides, and even family acquaintances began to speak, some anonymously, others on record, about the impossible pressures placed on the president's youngest son. One former tutor revealed that Barron often showed up to lessons visibly tense, shoulders hunched, his eyes darting nervously whenever his father's footsteps echoed down the hall. He worked hard, but there was always fear, the tutor said. Not fear of failing a test, but fear of failing his father. That pressure was suffocating. Another staff member recalled how Barron once whispered, "If I disappoint him, I'm nothing." The words, simple yet devastating, resonated far beyond the walls of the White House. Even former friends hinted at the weight he carried. A classmate described Barron as kind but withdrawn, reluctant to invite anyone over, always deflecting questions about his family. He lived in a mansion, but he looked like someone carrying chains, the classmate said. These testimonies fueled a broader national discussion. Commentators pointed out that Barron's story was not unique, but a reflection of millions of young Americans who grow up under the crushing burden of expectations and emotional control. Editorials in major newspapers asked the haunting question, if the president's son could not find safety in his own home, what does that mean for every other child suffering in silence? Jasmine Crockett seized on that point. Speaking at a packed town hall in Philadelphia, she said, "This is not just Barron's story. This is America's story. Every young person who has been told they are never good enough, every teenager who has been silenced by fear, every son or daughter who feels invisible in their own home, they see themselves in him. Barron is not alone, and neither are they." Her words electrified the room. Survivors stood and applauded, tears streaming down their faces. Social media echoed the moment with hashtags like "Barron is not alone" and "Every child matters," uniting a nation around the idea that one boy's suffering could spark a movement for millions. Meanwhile, Donald Trump doubled down, calling the testimonies garbage from bitter losers, and once again branding Jasmine a clown. The scandal reached a turning point when a shocking leak emerged. Excerpts from Barron Trump's private writings, allegedly taken from notes and messages shared with close friends. Though his voice had remained silent in public, his words on paper revealed a young man suffocating under the crushing weight of life in his father's shadow. One message, authenticated by cybersecurity experts, read, "Everyone sees me as a Trump, but nobody sees me as me. I feel like a prisoner in a house with golden bars." Another note was even more heartbreaking. "I'm told every day that I'll never be enough. Sometimes I wonder if disappearing would be easier than disappointing him again." The nation froze at these revelations. For millions of Americans, Barron's words stripped away the glossy surface of privilege and exposed the raw humanity of a young man drowning in expectation and fear. On talk shows, survivors of abusive households wept as they read his words aloud, saying they recognized the despair behind every sentence. Donald Trump's reaction was immediate and furious. At a press conference, his voice thundered, "Fake, total fake. My son is strong, my son is fine. These so-called writings are made up by the radical left, by Jasmine Crockett and her circus of lies." But handwriting analysts and digital forensics specialists countered almost instantly. The notes were authentic, and the style matched Barron's confirmed communications. The denials crumbled under the weight of evidence. The hashtags #golden bars and "We Hear You Barron" surged across social media. Millions of young Americans sharing their own struggles under the banner of his leaked words. For them, Barron's pain was no longer a distant tragedy. It was their own story spoken out loud. Jasmine Crockett, seizing the moment, delivered a blistering speech on the House floor. Holding up a printed copy of the note that read, "I'm told every day that I'll never be enough," she declared, "This is not just the cry of one young man. It is the cry of a generation. Barron Trump's words echo in every classroom, in every bedroom, in every home where silence hides pain. The president can call it fake. He can call me a clown. He can scream until his voice is gone. But these words are real, and they will not be silenced. The chamber fell silent, then erupted in applause. Across America, people leaned closer to their screens. The private agony of a 19-year-old had ignited a public reckoning, and Jasmine Crockett stood at the center, turning his whispered despair into a rallying cry for justice. The nation erupted. What began as whispers inside the White House had now exploded into a full-blown movement across America. The leaked notes from Barron Trump were no longer just his private despair. They had become the anthem of millions who recognized their own struggles in his words. From New York to Los Angeles, thousands marched in the streets. Protesters held posters of Barron's haunting line, "I feel like a prisoner in a house with golden bars." Crowds chanted in unison, "We hear you, Barron, we." And no more golden prisons. Survivors of abuse wore purple ribbons. Students carried signs reading, "Enough is enough," and parents joined in, declaring solidarity with every child who had been silenced by fear. Outside the White House, a massive crowd gathered daily, transforming Pennsylvania Avenue into what activists called the Freedom Zone. Candles lit the night as people stood silently, holding copies of Barron's words. It was no longer about politics. It was about humanity. Inside the administration, panic spread. Reporters demanded answers, hammering press secretaries with questions. Why has Barron not been allowed to speak? Why does the president dismiss his son's own words as fake? Every denial rang hollow. The silence of Barron himself was louder than any rebuttal. Donald Trump lashed out again, red-faced and raging at a rally in Florida. "This is a hoax! My son loves me! My son is strong! These protests are a disgrace! Jasmine Crockett is a fraud, and anyone who believes these lies is an enemy of America." But the footage only made him look more isolated. Split screens showed Trump's anger beside candlelit vigils of young people whispering Barron's words. The contrast was devastating. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, rose to meet the moment. At a rally in Chicago, before a crowd of tens of thousands, she declared, "This is no longer just about Barron Trump. This is about every young person who has been silenced by fear, mocked by power, or crushed under impossible expectations. America cannot call itself free if its children live as prisoners in their own homes." The crowd roared, chanting her name. On social media, hashtags like "We Hear You, Barron," "Golden Bars," and "Every Child Matters" dominated the national conversation. For many, Barron had become a symbol, not of privilege, but of resilience, of hidden suffering brought into the light. For the first time in modern history, the White House itself was under siege, not by political opponents, but by the collective voice of a nation demanding justice for a son who had been silent too long. And Jasmine Crockett had become that voice amplified 1,000 times over. The nation waited in silence as Jasmine Crockett took the stage in Washington, D.C. The crowd stretched for blocks, purple ribbons pinned to their coats, candles glowing like stars in the night. On the giant screens behind her, Barron Trump's own words were displayed in bold letters. "I feel like a prisoner in a house with golden bars." Jasmine stood tall, her voice steady, her eyes fierce. For too long, America has been told to look away, to excuse cruelty when it comes from power, to call silence strength when really it is suffering. But tonight, we say, no more. The crowd erupted, then quieted again as she raised her hand. Barron Trump never chose this life. He never asked for cameras, rallies, or politics. He is a young man who wanted dignity, respect, and freedom. Instead, he was silenced by fear. And if the son of the president can feel like a prisoner, what does that mean for the millions of young people across this country who suffer in silence with no one watching? Her words cut deep, echoing across the plaza. Survivors in the crowd wept openly, holding signs that read, "We hear you, Barron," and "No more golden prisons." Jasmine's tone sharpened as she pointed directly at the cameras. This is not just Barron's story. This is our story. Every child told they are not enough. Every young person crushed under impossible expectations. Every silent tear hidden behind a smile. Barron has become the mirror of a nation that must finally face its truth. The chants grew louder. We believe. We believe. Then came her closing words, measured, powerful, unforgettable. The president can rage, he can deny, he can call me names, but he cannot erase the truth written in his own son's silence. We will not let that silence continue. We will not let fear define the next generation. And tonight, we send a message to every young person in America. You are not invisible. You are not alone. And you are more than enough. The crowd exploded in cheers. Fireworks lit the night sky, and millions watching at home felt a shiver down their spine. Barron Trump's whispers had become the rallying cry of a movement, and Jasmine Crockett had turned his pain into a symbol of resilience, truth, and hope for an entire nation.